Imagine walking into your local gas station or maybe a nearby smoke shop.
Yeah, just running a normal errand.
Right, you're just grabbing a snack, paying for gas. And right there, next to the cash register and the breath mints, is this tiny 2-ounce bottle.
It's usually about 11 bucks.
Exactly. And the label is bright, it's modern, very inviting. It promises things like focus, energy, and a mood lift.
Sounds great, right?
Yeah, it boldly claims to be a natural plant-based herbal supplement. So you might think it sounds like a perfectly fine alternative to an energy drink, but inside that little bottle is a substance that can act on your brain with 13 times the potency of morphine.
The contrast there is, it's just staggering between how these products are packaged and what they actually do to the human body.
It really is.
What looks like a harmless everyday pick-me-up is actually a highly complex, fiercely potent compound. And that disconnect, that gap between perception and reality, is exactly why we're analyzing this stack of sources today.
Welcome to this deep dive into our source material. Our mission today is an urgent public service announcement. We are pulling apart the research to uncover the hidden risks and the extreme dangers of a substance called Kratom.
And specifically, we're looking at its highly concentrated, really potent compound known as 7-OH.
But we want to speak directly to you, the listener, today. Whether you are someone in active recovery, maybe a friend or family member supporting someone in recovery, or
just a curious person.
Right, someone who reasonably assumes that a legally sold gas station supplement must be fundamentally safe. The information in these sources is crucial for you to hear.
We have pulled together some incredibly illuminating research for this deep dive. We're looking at pharmacological insights from medicinal chemist Dr. Chris McCurdy,
We've got neurobiology from Dr. Andrew Huberman,
psychiatric data from Dr. Sunil Reg,
and a harrowing first-hand account of addiction from a former user named Evan. We're going to break all of this down and keep it totally free of dense medical jargon.
That's the goal, to give you the clear, practical mechanics of how this substance actually operates. Once you understand the underlying chemistry and those psychological traps, you are in a much better position to protect yourself and the people you care about.
So let's start with the origin story. Because before it was bottled and sold next to energy drinks, Kratom had a very specific, traditional use.
Right, looking at the botanical sources, this comes from a tropical tree native to Southeast Asia.
Places like Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia.
Yeah, the plant is called Metrigona speciosa. And for centuries, farmers and outdoor laborers in those regions utilized the fresh leaves of this tree.
Just plucking them right off the branches.
Exactly. They would chew them raw or perhaps brew them into a very mild tea. And they were doing this to combat physical fatigue during incredibly hot, grueling work days in the fields.
So in its fresh, natural state, consumed in the small amounts, it just provided a mild energy boost.
It sounds almost identical to how people in the West use a morning cup of coffee to get through a long shift.
But the sources reveal a really fascinating and dangerous twist here. Kratom is essentially a Jekyll and Hyde plant.
Yeah, it completely changes its functional identity depending on how much of it's consumed.
And that shapeshifting nature is what catches so many users entirely off guard. At low doses, it behaves as a stimulant. The user feels alert, energetic, maybe a bit talkative.
But as the dose increases, it hits this pharmacological tipping point. It stops acting as a stimulant altogether.
It just completely switches gears.
It does. It transforms into a powerful sedative and painkiller. And it achieves this by actively mimicking prescription opioids in the brain.
So you're saying it shifts from basically caffeine to morphine just based on the volume you consume.
Practically.
Now, obviously, the traditional use of chewing fresh leaves in a field in Southeast Asia is worlds apart from what is happening in Western markets today.
Worlds apart. We are looking at a fundamentally different delivery system in the modern market.
The transformation from a raw leaf to the products we see today, it changes everything about how the substance interacts with the human body.
Instead of fresh leaves, the U.S. market is flooded with dried powders, massive capsules, and highly concentrated liquid energy shots.
Dr. Chris McCurdy uses an incredibly helpful analogy here in the sources.
He does. He explains that chewing the traditional leaf is like slowly sipping a light beer over a long afternoon. Your digestive system has to work really hard to break down the plant matter and slowly absorb the active compounds.
But taking one of those highly concentrated liquid shots...
That is a completely different biological event.
Right.
It is the equivalent of slamming 3 shots of tequila back to back.
Yeah.
The active chemicals have already been stripped from the plant and artificially concentrated into a liquid.
So when you drink it, there's no slow digestive release.
None at all. It hits your bloodstream and your brain in an immediate, overwhelming wave.
And deceptive packaging plays a massive role in this overwhelming wave. You know, a consumer might pick up that tiny 2-ounce bottle we mentioned earlier, assuming it's a single serving.
Because why wouldn't you? It's tiny.
Right. But if you read the fine print, the manufacturer might claim that tiny bottle contains 2, 3, or even 4 servings.
And human behavior dictates that almost no one opens a tiny liquid shot, measures out a third of it, and puts the rest in the fridge.
No, people drink the entire bottle in one gulp.
And by doing so, they accidentally flood their brain with a massive dose.
Yeah.
They instantly blow past that mild stimulant phase and crash straight into the heavy opioid-like sedative phase.
That specific scenario is exactly what trapped Evan. His story is heavily featured in our sources, and it is just a textbook example of how innocent this can start.
Yeah, Evan was dealing with adult ADHD. He was actively looking for a natural, over-the-counter way to manage his symptoms.
He just wanted to find some focus for his work and elevate his mood, so he bought an $11 bottle of a Kratom drink called Feel Free.
And because it was sitting right there next to the energy drinks, marketed as a plant-based wellness supplement, he truly believed it was a safe, mild alternative to prescription ADHD medications.
He even tried to be responsible about it, which is the crazy part. He set extremely strict rules for himself, promising he would only take it every other day to avoid building a tolerance.
But Evan was totally unaware of the intense chemical warfare about to happen in his brain.
To understand what Evan was up against, we need to look at what is actually inside that bottle. We really need to talk about 7-OH.
Yeah, let's keep the chemistry accessible here. Imagine that the Kratom plant is filled with dozens of different chemical keys.
Scientists call these alkaloids, right?
Right, alkaloids.
Huh.
And your brain has various locks, which are your neural receptors. 7-OH, which stands for 7-hydroxymetragenine, is one of those specific chemical keys found in the plant.
And it happens to be the master key for the brain's opioid locks.
Exactly. And the data on this specific key is easily the most shocking statistic in our entire stack of research.
7-OH is roughly 13 times more potent than morphine at attaching to the brain's opioid receptors. 13 times. It's a staggering number to even comprehend. When that 7-OH key turns the opioid lock in the brain, it triggers the exact same neurological pathways as heavy prescription painkillers.
And the modern market has basically weaponized this.
They absolutely have. We're currently facing a synthetics crisis because manufacturers are not just grinding up leaves anymore.
They are actively manipulating the chemistry to maximize the addictive potential.
They're chemically extracting the 7-OH, artificially concentrating it, and sometimes even synthetically modifying it in labs to pack as much of it as physically possible into these products.
So these are no longer natural plant supplements.
Not even close. They are unregulated, highly addictive, synthetic adjacent drugs.
The potency and the accessibility have gotten so extreme that some experts and harm reduction advocates are literally referring to these products as gas station heroin.
And regulatory bodies are finally sounding the alarm. The FDA has recently recommended a severe crackdown specifically targeting 7-OH.
Because its potential for abuse and severe addiction is just undeniable at this point. To understand why it's so addictive, we have to look at how it hijacks the brain's infrastructure. Kratom doesn't just tap gently on one neural pathway. Dr. McCurdy describes Kratom's mechanism of action as a pharmaceutical shotgun.
A pharmaceutical shotgun? That paints a terrifying picture of what's happening under the hood. How does that shotgun blast actually affect the brain's systems?
Well, instead of targeting a single receptor, Kratom hits 3 major neurological systems simultaneously. First, it hits the opioid system, which aggressively numbs both physical and emotional pain.
Okay.
Second, it hits the serotonin system, which artificially forces your mood up, giving you a false sense of profound well-being and happiness.
Wow.
And third, it hits the adrenaline system, pumping you full of physical energy and drive.
So a user is receiving heavy pain relief, a massive mood elevation, and a surge of manic energy all at the exact same moment.
That combination creates an incredibly powerful psychological high. For someone struggling with anxiety, depression, or physical pain, it feels like the ultimate magical cure-all.
But that broad, sweeping, 3-pronged effect is precisely what digs the addiction trap so deep.
because your brain quickly learned that this one tiny bottle solves every problem simultaneously, making it incredibly difficult to walk away from.
And this brings up a massive flashing warning sign for a very specific demographic. Dr. Andrew Huberman highlights a critical piece of neurobiology in the sources.
He notes that roughly 10 to 40% of the general population possesses a brain chemistry that aggressively disproportionately responds to opioids.
10 to 40%, that is a huge chunk of people.
It is. When these individuals consume an opioid, their brain floods with dopamine in a way that feels intensely euphoric, creating an immediate, profound attachment to the substance.
Connecting this to the bigger picture, if someone is already in recovery from other substances, or if they simply happen to possess that specific genetic neurochemistry, experimenting with a Kratom shot is not a casual choice.
No, it is the biological equivalent of pouring high-octane gasoline on a fire. The pathway from first use to a brutal, deeply entrenched addiction is incredibly short for this group of people.
Which brings us back to Evan's descent into that exact trap. Those strict rules he set about taking it every other day, they completely dissolved.
The pharmaceutical shotgun effect took over entirely.
He soon needed it every single day just to achieve a baseline level of functioning and to stave off the crushing anxiety that crept in the moment the drug started leaving his system.
It escalated to the point where Evan tried to build a physical barrier to stop his own addiction.
Yeah, he bought a heavy-duty time-lock safe, placed his Kratom powder inside, set the timer for 24 hours, and locked it.
He was literally trying to use a physical box to override a chemical hijacking in his brain.
It's a desperate measure.
It really illustrates the total loss of control.
Because the physical cravings and the suffocating panic became entirely overwhelming. Evan couldn't make it 24 hours. He ended up standing in his kitchen, violently shaking this time-lock safe.
And when that didn't work,
he grabbed a kitchen knife. He started violently jamming it into the plastic seams of the safe, tearing and prying at it just enough to create a tiny opening.
Unbelievable.
He then shook the safe over his kitchen counter, scraping up the fine, powdery dust of the Kratom that spilled out just to consume it so he could feel normal again.
That image, it just captures the raw, unfiltered reality of chemical dependency. And it leads to a vital point about trying to quit.
Right.
Getting off Kratom is not like skipping your morning coffee and enduring a mild caffeine headache for a day. The withdrawals are a severe systemic shock to the body.
Because it's sold alongside energy drinks, people assume they can just stop taking it whenever they want. But the sources outline withdrawal symptoms that are agonizing.
Users report intense, full-body anxiety, severe insomnia where sleep is impossible for days on end,
Restless leg syndrome that feels like electricity shooting through the limbs.
and debilitating nausea. What the user's experiencing is a full-blown opioid withdrawal.
Because the Kratom was artificially supplying the pain-killing and mood-regulating chemicals, the body simply stopped producing its own.
Exactly. When the kratom is suddenly removed, the brain is left completely depleted. It goes into a state of sheer physiological panic, screaming for the chemical just to maintain basic equilibrium.
And the danger of this substance isn't just limited to the chemical addiction itself. The physical bottle you buy at the store introduces a whole new layer of risk.
Because there is virtually no FDA oversight or regulation on the manufacturing of these gas station products, buying Kratom right now is effectively playing Russian roulette.
Without regulatory guardrails, you are relying entirely on the honor system of anonymous manufacturers.
And when independent labs and state regulators have pulled these products off the shelves and tested them, the hidden ingredients they have discovered are horrifying.
They routinely find toxic heavy metals like lead and arsenic mixed into the powders due to poor processing.
They found severe bacterial contamination too. In fact, there was a massive multi-state outbreak of salmonella poisoning traced directly back to contaminated patches of Kratom.
And beyond the accidental contamination, there is an even more sinister threat hiding in these bottles. Laboratories have found products secretly spiked with actual illicit synthetic opioids.
Yeah, unscrupulous manufacturers will quietly mix in cheap, highly addictive synthetic drugs to ensure the product hits harder. It guarantees the buyer gets hooked and keeps coming back to their specific brand.
Even if a user manages to find a product that is pure Kratom or a pure 7-OH concentrate, without any heavy metals or hidden illicit drugs, the medical risks associated with high doses are severe.
This brings us to the psychiatric insights from Dr. Sela Reg. He points out that the chemical storm Kratom creates in the brain can lead to severe psychiatric emergencies.
Emergency rooms are seeing patients presenting with substance-induced acute psychosis.
So the drug is artificially flooding the brain with so much dopamine and serotonin that it literally detaches the user from reality.
Precisely. The brain's chemistry is pushed so far out of balance that patients experience terrifying auditory and visual hallucinations, profound paranoia, and violent seizures.
And the physical organs take a massive hit as well. There are well-documented cases of severe liver injury where the organs simply cannot filter the massive influx of alkaloids and toxins fast enough, leading to acute failure.
And the ultimate, most devastating risk highlighted in our sources is life-threatening respiratory failure.
This is the classic mechanism of how traditional opioids cause fatal overdoses. The drug heavily depresses the central nervous system.
It slows the heart rate and breathing down to such a degree that the brain simply forgets to send the signal to the lungs to breathe.
Typically while the person is unconscious or sleeping. While raw, unadulterated kratom leaf alone has a slightly lower risk of triggering this than pure morphine, the modern landscape of highly concentrated 7-OH extracts entirely changes that math.
When these massive doses are taken, or if the kratom is mixed with alcohol or other daily medications, the risk of respiratory depression is heavily amplified.
It's a perfect storm of accessibility, extreme potency, and a complete lack of public awareness.
Let's bring all of this research together for you. We started this deep dive talking about a brightly colored little bottle sitting next to the breath mints. The core urgent message we want you to walk away with today is this. Just because a substance is sold openly at a gas station, just because you don't need a prescription to buy it, and just because the label says natural or plant-based does not mean it is safe.
The modern kratom industry has taken a traditional, mild leaf and mutated it into dangerously potent, unregulated extracts. It's a complex substance that will actively hijack your brain's opioid receptors, plunge you into severe addiction with agonizing withdrawals, and put you at risk for psychiatric breaks and organ failure.
If you are listening to this right now and you recognize yourself in Evan's story, if you started taking this thinking it was just a harmless focus supplement and now you feel trapped in a cycle you cannot break, we have a crucial message for you.
If you need help with an addiction to kratom, 7-OH, or any other substance, you are not alone. You can receive incredible, judgment-free support at Outreach 419 from certified peer recovery coaches located in Fenwick, Michigan.
To learn more or to get help right now, visit their organization at www.outreach419.com. That is outreach419.com. There is a way out, and there are trained professionals ready to help you navigate it.
Looking at the sheer scale of how this drug has permeated everyday convenience stores, it raises a deeply unsettling question to leave you with today.
If a substance capable of mimicking morphine with 13 times the potency can be legally packaged and sold as a quick energy boost to anyone walking off the street, what other harmless supplements are hiding in plain sight, waiting to rewrite the chemistry of our brains?